All right, hello and welcome to another Expert Insight interview. My name is John Golden from Sales Pop, online sales magazine, and Pipeliner CRM, joining you as usual from San Diego. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Damon Lembi, who is just up the coast there in San Francisco. How you doing, Damon?
John, it's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and Damon's actually in Sausalito, where Otis Redding sitting by the dock of the bay.
That's right. I
That's
mean, there's a famous music studio called The Plant right down, who's had everybody from Janis Joplin to John Lennon. I could see it out the window.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Well, that's always remember that's where Otis Redding wrote his Sitting by the Dock of the Bay. So, but great music town, San Francisco. Great music history.
Yeah. One more quick note. The drink Tequila Sunrise was actually originated at the Trident restaurant by the Rolling Stones in Sausalito.
Oh, there you go.
There's a little music tip for you.
Excellent. And Damon is the CEO of Learn It. And what we want to talk about today is just number one, I want to understand your approach to learning, Damon, and then we could talk a little bit about some of those more challenging audiences, like or groups to train, such as maybe people coming into leadership positions, maybe salespeople becoming sales leaders and that. So first of all, what your approach to training? What sets you apart from other training providers?
No, I think it's a great question. I mean, Learn It's a live learning platform. I was mentioning we're heading into our 30th year this month in June, July in 2025. And customers turn to us when they're looking to uh, promote people from individual contributors to new managers and they're lacking those skills, or their organization is struggling when it comes to communication and people are working in silos and they want to get
Mhm.
people to have communicate better, or even people are just demanding it and they're unhappy at work because they don't feel like they have enough professional development. So that's when they turn to us. We help them through live learning mostly, and we tailor programs specifically to help them reach those business outcomes, which I think is very important when it comes to training. It shouldn't just be about, hey, people enjoyed the classes. We want to do our best to tie it back to ROI. I think what makes us different is that we're able to do it at scale. We don't put a lot of roadblocks in front of it, and we can repurpose the content we have to fit their specific business needs relatively quickly.
Yeah, no, it's a good point especially obviously on the outcomes and ROI, because let's face it, I mean, you would know this, and I have been in the training business myself. You'd know that it's the first thing that they cut from any budget cut. The training dollars go away, so you always have to be able to prove the ROI. And it's also one thing I always say, Damon, if you line up 100 CEOs and say, how important is training? 100 of them will say absolutely. And then when you say, how many of you have dedicated budget to it this year? And maybe one or two will put their hands up. So it's an ongoing struggle.
Yeah, I'd like to say 100 out of 100 would say yes. It's funny. I had a conversation dinner the other night with a friend who's the CEO of a crypto company, and he was totally against training, saying that he thought that his people should already be trained up. I'm like, and he was frustrated that the reason why we're having dinner is because he wants to engage Learn It to help his
Mhm.
team. And he was frustrated, saying, look, all these leaders, they're asking for training, but they should already have these skills. And I said to him, doesn't matter what his name is, I said to him, that's not how it works. The
Mm.
skills and what people need to be successful in these new roles are evolving and changing. And you should be happy that your team is looking to grow and better themselves and coming to you with those needs.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. I think the fact that they're looking for training and they want training is a really good thing, because too often, people kind of sit there silently and kind of muddle through and never ask for it. And that's part of the reason why they never receive it, because they never actually ask for it. So that's a good thing. Explain to me a little bit about skill stacking. How does that feed into what you do?
Of skill stacking, I mean, is essentially a term we came up with at Learn It that we use. Let's say somebody is going into a leadership position and they want everybody to have the essential skills for their management team. And we kind of ask them, well, what do you mean by the essential skills? Because everybody could be different.
Hmm.
And let's say a group says it's, critical thinking, coaching, being a better listener, and communicating across cultures, whatever. For us, skill stacking is you start with some of the basic skills and then you build on top of them. So you get a foundation. Let's say it's around communication. You start off with a communication class, and then maybe you move into how to become a better listener, and then how to give better feedback, and so forth.
Yeah, so I mean, so it's yeah, no, that's really good. So it's a progressive kind of where it builds upon each other. And then how does your learning then get reinforced afterwards? Because that's always the challenge, isn't it? When you train people, is how does it become part of the culture? How does it become embedded in the daily work practice?
That's a great question, and it's very important because, John, you know as well as I do, you can't go in and take a 2-hour class on emotional intelligence or giving feedback and
Mhm.
then be able to crush it and regret it.
Yeah,
That's not how it happens. In my opinion, and maybe my team might even like me saying this, it's what takes place after the class.
yeah.
So you go in, you take a class, and then you got to put it into action. I love this saying by this gentleman, David Katz, who had on my show, that learning without doing is treason. Um, so it's implementing what you learned. And so what we do to help right now, we have skill boosters where we have either small group coaching or monthly check-ins with people, to ask them to share experiences like, okay, so we went through the 4 growth model. Give me an example of when you applied it or didn't apply it. That's what we have right now. We also have some on-demand videos, which, some people like, some people don't, as far as utilization. But I would say fast forward 6 to 12 months, we have to have an AI habit coach to go along with it, and
Yeah,
that's our number one initiative. And it's not to replace, John. It's not to replace live learning. I think that's
sure.
always going to be there, and that's our core
Hmm.
business. But what you said is so important. It's making the learning sticky,
Yeah.
and we want to create a bot or an agent where you can literally 15 minutes before you go into a difficult conversation, you can have a natural voice conversation saying, hey, I have to meet with Mary and I'm kind of challenged with what I want to say to her. Can you role play with me?
Hmm.
And maybe it even knows Mary's like disc score or something like that, right?
Right.
Like she's an I or whatever, however that works. And so that's where I think the real retention and learning comes in and sticks, is if you people are held accountable, or at least it's intentional and top of mind of putting it into practice.
Yeah, and that seems like a more scalable approach because obviously, like having live coaches do that kind of thing, you're never going to be able,
No.
and you're never going to be able to sync and logistics wise and everything to make that work, and certainly to make it scalable. So it sounds like an excellent use of AI. And just think about it, that would be great if you were able to do a role play just before you go into a difficult meeting. So you go in like feeling like you. It's kind of like sports, isn't it? You've warmed up beforehand.
100%. It's like getting batting practice before a baseball game. I used to be a baseball player,
Mhm.
so I have all my baseball analogies. And then at the end of the day, and ROI is something that obviously that's super tough when it comes to learning, like we kind of touched on. And at the end of the day, if you have these conversations with this agent or whatever, and then it can roll up to a dashboard, so maybe the
Mhm.
buyers can see how often it's being used, and even maybe not being big brotherish, but seeing the different types of conversations that are happening, then when it comes time to renew and invest in training again, there's a lot more comfort level in knowing that their team's getting something out of it. And I think for learning, it's figuring out how you tie it back to the business goals and outcomes.
Mhm. Yeah, no, and absolutely, absolutely, because you have to be able to show that. You have to be able, as I said earlier, if you can't do that, then you run the risk of being being the first on
Mhm.
the chopping block. One of the other challenges, Damon, I think a lot of organizations are facing. Right, we have 5 or 6 generations in the workplace. I don't know whether it's 5 or 6. Somebody said 6 to me one time. I don't know what that sixth is, but I people.
Yeah, I thought 5, but if you're saying 6, then I
No,
gotta
no, it's not
figure
me.
that one
Somebody
out
else
too.
did, and hey, who am I to argue?
Yeah.
But and so you have all these different generations, and now we're bringing people into leadership positions, right? And they could be brand new, people, they could have been around for a while. They could be people going into leadership now, having to manage multiple generations and stuff. Talk to me a little bit about the leadership training for transitioning somebody into a leadership position, particularly somebody who may not have been in that position before.
Well, first and foremost, I think it's really important for all you leaders out there and for the individual contributors considering moving into a leadership role is understanding, why do you want to do this in the first place? I mean, the most easy example to use is a top performing sales rep going
Mhm.
into a sales leadership role. I just kind of informally mentor a bunch of salespeople, and typically that usually comes up where somebody will call me excited and say, I'm so excited, I'm getting promoted into a leadership role," and I'm like, knowing them, I'll say, "You shouldn't do it because
Mhm.
that's not, you're not the type of person." Because as an individual contributor, you you own your own success. You go out and you do the work. On the flip side, when you're a leader, it's just like a coach. You have to learn how to win through your team. And
Mhm.
it's a completely different skill set. It's a completely different skill set. But if you have somebody who wants to move into that role and they're a good fit, the skills that they need are, again, they need to be better listeners. Okay, you got to be a great listener when it comes to doing sales too, anyways. But a big one is delegation. How do you learn to delegate? And that's something that's very difficult, especially when you're a top producer, individual contributor, and then also having empathy.
Mhm.
I think what I see, whether it's in sales or whether it's in other types of roles, is that people just can't put themselves in somebody else's shoes, and they get really frustrated, and they'll come to me and they'll say, "I don't understand why this person can't do it the way I did it," and so then they jump in, and so empathy is a big skill, delegation, and and also coaching, just learning how to coach people, and what that takes, and that's formal and informal coaching. I'm a big believer that the best coaching happens in the cracks. So
Yeah.
you go in
Yeah.
for a walk with somebody to Starbucks to get a coffee or get a drink, have a conversation with them there. Maybe after a sales call, what went well, what didn't go well. So mixing in that type of learning, I think is critical. If you want to add in formal training, great. But if you throw somebody into a new manager role, I mean, without any kind of resources or tools, I mean, it's just a recipe for disaster. And not only are they going to be frustrated and potentially leave, but think about the 5, 10, 15 people that they're leading
Yep.
and what their experience is going to be like. It's going to be miserable.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, especially what you said there about when you talk to people about the opportunity they have to move into a leadership position. I'm the same. When I used to run organizations, and I would have that conversation with some people. Sometimes I'd say, okay, what do you want to do? And they'd say, oh, I want to move up and be a manager. And I say, why? And they go, well, I think I'll be good at it. And I said, you know what managing is like? You know what people are like? I
Yeah.
said, you're part psychiatrist,
Mhm.
psychologist, parent, teacher, and punching bag behind your back mainly, but the punch bag as well, when everything. I said, so is that really what you want to do? Are you really prepared for that? And I
It,
think, but I think part of the problem, Damon, and I think you touched on it here, part of the problem is we set that up as the only career path for people.
it's outdated thinking. It's
Yeah.
outdated thinking. I mean, we, people today still think that that's the career trajectory you got to take, and
Mhm.
that's not the case. I mean, we should have promoting people for their technical ability or their
Yeah.
different type of ability, and recognize them for that. And for the individual, they need to look at things differently,
Yep.
because leading is everything you said, John. Plus, it's a 24/7 job.
Yeah.
I have a very good friend who I had that conversation with him a year ago about not doing it. And he moved into a leadership role. And all he says to me is like, I got people calling me on the weekends. I'm always on. And he's like, I just want to go back to selling and taking care of my own book of business.
Mhm.
And so it's so important. I think that as organizations, we need to look at different ways to recognize our team members without always going the leadership track.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you mentioned one of the key skills, and I think this is so important as well, is coaching, because most people don't know how to coach. Most people's idea of coaching is maybe playing, you played baseball, in maybe it was volleyball, maybe it was something else, but or high school football, but it was the coach shouting from the sideline saying, do this, no, do it this way, do that. And that's the last coaching most people have had, so or experience of being coached, so they bring that into the job and they think, okay, my job is, let me just tell everybody what they should do,
Mhm.
and if they do it my way, everything will be fine.
Yeah, I mean, that's command and control. And quite frankly, that doesn't I mean, I played Division I baseball, and I had the good fortune I played for 3 Hall of Fame baseball coaches, and
Mhm.
I even had a conversation with one of them who retired, 10 years ago, and he said to me, he's like, "How long do you think I would last coaching these days?" I said, "Probably 3 weeks." Because it's even a different environment then. You
Yeah.
can't scream at people anymore. Um, Not necessarily that I thought that was a bad thing, at least back in my day. I
Mhm.
mean, it really woke me up as a 21-year-old or whatever. But the command and control approach to leadership doesn't work. I think you got to go with what Stephen M. R. Covey talks about is the trust and inspire. You know,
Mhm.
build trust, be a people first organization. Um, People want purpose and belonging, and that's what they want out of their coaches, out of their leaders. Somebody who's more of a guide than
Yeah.
a dictator.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's why I think, especially when salespeople are promoted into sales leadership positions, one of the things that they have to resist, and you touched on this, one of the things they have to resist is becoming the super closer. That's
Mhm.
like parachuting in at the end and saying, "Oh, Damon, I'll help you get this over the line. You just step over there to the side. I'll close this for you." And I may think I'm doing you and the company a favor, but all I'm doing is demotivating you.
And we talked about scaling earlier.
Yeah.
On a different level, you can't scale that way either.
Mhm.
If you have 15 people on your sales team and you're jumping in and you're closing all the deals, you know what happens to your team? They stop thinking for themselves
Mhm.
because they know Damon's going to join. He's just going to jump in. I mean, one of my favorite stories of all time is I had this rep who ended up being with me for 10 or 15, well, 15 years. Very long story short, I went to one of her first meetings. She sat down, she built a nice connection with the customer, but she had no idea what she was talking about. I mean, absolutely no idea. I think yeah, it doesn't even matter. But I sat on my hands. I resisted the urge to jump in and correct her and change
Mhm.
everything. At the end of the day, after the meeting, I sat down with her. I like, hey, what went well? What can we do differently? Tell me, all open-ended questions.
Mhm.
And it helped her build her confidence. And I'm still good friends with her, and we kind of joke about it. But by doing that and creating an environment where people feel like they can be themselves and they could learn and grow is much better than trying to be a hero, and jumping in and making it all about you and answering it. Sure, it might short term, you might lose a couple deals. I mean, hopefully you don't. But if you want to scale long term and you want to keep great talent, you got to coach them to being successful.
Yeah. No, no, absolutely, 100%. And how do you help? I mean, even for yourself and your own organization, and when you talk to others, how do you help maintain that idea of continuous learning and always wanting to learn and being curious? Because let's face it, I mean, as we become more experienced and things go on, we can kind of lull ourselves into a false sense of security, thinking that we know everything, and stop learning.
Well, for me personally, especially as a small business owner,
Mhm.
I don't wanna stop learning almost out of fear for my
Right.
organization. I kind of feel responsible for the 50, 60 people that are here, who depend on Learn It for their mortgage and their family and their insurance. And I feel like if I stop learning and if I'm like, "Oh, I've been successful, we've trained
Mhm.
2,000,000 people," well, we can be displaced. We could lose. So I feel like I owe it to myself and to my team and my family to continue learning and growing and evolving because I'm afraid of what will happen if I don't. I also kind of enjoy it. On the other hand, you do see a lot of senior level executives who get to a point and say, "I've hit the pinnacle.
Mhm.
I mean, I've had so much success. Why do I need to continue to learn and grow?" And I'm sure, John, I mean, just like on your show, I have a podcast, Learn It All podcast. The most incredible leaders that I've ever interviewed, guys like Doug Conant, who did a turnaround at Campbell's, and Tom Mendoza at NetApp, they're the most curious, humble, and they're still learning in
Mhm.
their, even after retirement, because it just keeps them going and keeps them interested. So it's about being curious, and I think, being humble enough to know, look, we don't have all the answers,
Yeah.
and there's always more to learn and grow. And I think I just think that's critical, especially today with AI stuff we talked about.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing now is that if you're not, if you have been lagging on your learning, if you've been lagging on creating a learning environment in your organization, you better get on that because, as we said, I mean, things are have always been changing rapidly, but now with AI, I mean, they're turning things on their head. So I mean, you could really find yourself in a world of hurt if you're not staying on top of things. And I think also, Damon, let's face it, the learning organizations are the ones that most people want to work for at the end of the day because you may be, I mean, you may be sort of senior in your career and everything, and maybe it's not the biggest motivation that it should be. But for other people in your organization, especially those coming in, like the opportunity to learn is huge.
Well, one thing I say all the time is you need, as a leader, to model the behavior
Mhm.
that you want your team to deliver on. And if you want to have a great organization, you have to have a great learning culture. And I'm not talking just about formal training. I'm
Yeah, yeah.
talking about people wanting to experiment, try things, and get out of their comfort zone.
Mhm.
And in order for that to happen, people need to be able to look up to their leaders and say, hey, look, Damon's trying this. He's out doing podcasting or doing whatever, and he's putting himself out there and he's trying to learn and get better and grow. And at the end of the day, John, you cannot keep great talent these days. And I'm not just talking about
Yep.
Gen Z
Mhm.
and millennial. I'm talking about everybody. Everybody wants to work in an organization where they feel like there's purpose for them, that they belong. And how do you feel purpose and belonging? Is when you feel like your organization has your back and that they're going to invest in you. And I think that that is so key when it comes to an organization being a learning organization.
Yeah, and one thing, Adele, I'll never forget from years ago, when I first started in the training industry, somebody, a CEO of an organization, said to the senior salesperson I was helping at that time. They said, "Why should I train my people if I train them, and that if I train them up and skill them up and they leave, they just take those with them."
Mhm.
And the sales I just thought it was a great comeback. And he said, "Yeah." He goes, "But what about if you don't train them and they stay?"
I love that one. Yeah, no, I've heard that. Yeah, that's a great one. And it's so true.
Yeah.
And so that's what we do at Learn It. We're a learning organization, and I've especially I don't like hiring experienced salespeople when I don't have to.
Mhm.
I rather hire individuals with aptitude and attitude, right?
Right.
With the right aptitude and attitude, people who are hungry and willing to try. Where I've brought in individuals who are successful at other organizations in our industry, which is probably also not the best thing to do sometimes, and they think they have it all figured out and they have all the answers.
Mhm.
Well, how can you sell learning if you're not passionate about yourself?
Exactly. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and just like with your business with CRMs, if
Mhm.
you don't believe that it's important to be able to leverage CRM not only to help your team but to help your customers and everything
Yeah.
else, how can you get in front of your customers and influence them on their decisions on what to do with the CRM?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to be honest, that's the one thing that comes through immediately. You can tell when you're talking to somebody who believes
Mhm.
in what this product or service they're selling and somebody who's just doing it as a job. It becomes very apparent very quickly.
And you know what's important about that? What I always tell salespeople, because sometimes they get all wrapped up in having all the technical knowledge and all the
Yeah.
complexity and everything. I say at the end of the day, like when I get a jump on a call with somebody trying to sell me something, which they always are, there's
Mhm.
always something. And the ones who get on there and they have their their slide deck and they go through slides and they can't veer off the
Mhm.
course at all and they go through the motions. I'm not going to buy from people like that. I can't connect with people like that. But if
Mhm.
I get somebody, even if they don't even know what they're talking about enough, I mean, maybe they can learn, but if they could have a genuine conversation and they're passionate about what they're talking about, and at least in their organization, they know who to connect me with to get those answers, like
Mhm.
a sales engineer or something. I want to work with people like that,
Yeah.
who get you excited because if I'm going to spend $50,000, couple $100,000, who knows how much, I sure as heck want the person who I'm buying it from to be, you know,
Yeah.
believe in being excited about what their product is.
Absolutely,
not just
absolutely.
checking the box.
Yeah, and that's one thing, and the nice thing about that is, that's something that's entirely within your control. You know, you can choose how you show up, you choose how your attitude. You know, if you're selling something you don't believe in, really
Mhm.
get a different job, because you know life's too short to be selling something that you don't even have any connection to.
Look, I agree with you 1,000%. Now, I'm not going to, advocate for you to just turn around and quit your job because the market's a little tough right
Sure,
now.
sure, sure.
But when people come to work at Learn It, I'm usually the last person to meet with them, before they come on board or whatever. I always say, look, I want you here for a long time. But
Mhm.
while you're here, even if it's for, 2 years or 20 years or 10 months, whatever, I want you to pick up skills that you could use throughout your whole life. And if there's
Right.
ever a time where you're waking up in the morning and you're going to go to the office or turning on Zoom because of it's remote work these days,
Mhm.
and you're like, man, I really don't want to do this. I don't want to be here anymore. Either go talk to your manager and figure it out, or come see me. We could either figure out how to pivot you in a different area for your strengths, or let's just figure out a way to help you move somewhere else. I've done that, John, with so many employees over the years that I worked with who've been with me for a long time. And it's tough to stick your neck out there and maybe do something new.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, they're so much happier and they thank me for it afterwards. So life is too short to be freaking miserable at your job.
Yeah, perfect. Well, that's a great way to round this out. Like, life's too short to be freaking miserable at your job.
Yeah.
That's a great soundbite. Well, listen, thanks again, Damon. All of Damon's information will be below this video. But before we go, please do remind people about you and what you do.
So, anyways, I'm Damon Lembi. I have a podcast called the Learn It All Podcast. Check it out. John's coming on, and I'm the CEO of Learn It, a live learning platform. And you can check us out at learnit.com and connect with me on LinkedIn, Damon Lembi.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, Damon. Thank you for watching and listening. I'll see you all again very soon. Thank
Thanks,
you.
John.